Hello there, and welcome to this episode of the Building Better Cultures podcast with me, Scott McInnes. Really nice to have you here if it's your first time. Really nice to have you back if it's not. Thanks for being here. My usual little ask at the start of every, maybe most podcast episodes is just if you have a few minutes, if however you are listening to us gives you the opportunity to give us a little rating and a little comment about what you like about the pod, then please take the opportunity to do so. It does really help in getting the podcast out there. And that's one of the reasons we do it, to get more people listening. So really looking forward to today's episode, which is with a client that we worked with a couple of years ago, the Police Service of Northern Ireland. And I'm delighted to be joined by Assistant Chief Officer Clare Duffield, who is Assistant Chief Officer for People and Organisational Development in the organisation. Clare, good morning.
Good morning, Scott. Thank you very much for inviting me to join you.
You're welcome. You're very welcome. Listen, so it's been a little while since we worked together on your culture audit. We're going to talk about that a little bit more later on. But why don't we kick off with you just perhaps giving listeners a bit of a feel for you about the PSNI and perhaps your role in there.
Okay. Well, hi, everyone that's listening. Lovely to be part of this and an opportunity to talk about workplace culture, which is something that's close to my heart throughout my career. So I'm a mum, a triathlete and an HR professional. I have an HR professional background, currently working in the Police Service of Northern Ireland, which is a fantastic organisation doing really important work for the public and communities of Northern Ireland. I started my career in the retail business, then found a passion for all of the people aspects of business. So after 15 years in retailing, and then as a mum at that stage with young kids, and so I didn't have to travel so much, moved back to roles in Northern Ireland, first of all in the health service, then in education, and today in policing. So varied experience of workplace culture, and today have responsibility for a number of different functions and departments within PSNI. So the traditional HR service that we offer, which has specialisms and HR services, occupational health and wellbeing, all of our police college where we train and deliver learning and development products for officers and staff, and health and safety. So a bit of a portfolio of services.
Brilliant. Thanks. And I love that the HR one came last in that list of mum, triathlete, HR professional. Tell me a little bit. So let's dive straight into culture, something that you said is very close to your heart. What do you see as being the key ingredients to nurture a culture that really serves your people and the organisation? And I guess actually, interestingly, in your case, the public, the people that the PSNI serves.
Yeah, well, I suppose, out there are so many, academic models, theories, definitions of culture. And, I've experienced those in different ways in different organisations. But for me, I'm sort of a straight talker, and I like to keep things that are meaningful to the workforce because, the term workplace culture, etc., none of that HR speak evokes warm feelings amongst the majority of the workforce. So for me, culture is what's it like to work here? And would I recommend this as to a friend? Would I recommend this organisation as an employer to a friend? And then in terms of the key ingredients, well, I think first and foremost for any business, any organisation, you have to be clear on why you exist. So what is the mission and purpose of the organisation? And then what are the traits, behaviours, practices that you see in your systems and processes and in your people that help you achieve that aim? So, for us here in PSNI, gosh, the mission and the purpose is so compelling and so important because it's about keeping people safe. It's about fighting crime. It's about bringing offenders to justice, about being victim focused, community focused, workforce focused. So I think, do all of our behaviours as individuals and as teams, do they then help us achieve that mission and purpose?
And do you think that, I think that what the mission and purpose that you have is incredibly noble, and I always think it's easier in organizations where you do have something very powerful and very human, whether it be policing or whether it be working in healthcare, where you're actually perhaps saving lives or helping people to get better. That's easier to sell and bring to life for employees. Have you any thoughts on in organizations, or maybe listeners are listening, where they maybe don't work in organizations? Maybe it's, I don't know, a bank, maybe it's an insurance company, maybe it's somebody that just sells widgets. How do they do it?
Well, I think it's about finding that hook. And, usually, first of all, and again, it's why do you recruit the people that you're recruiting? Do they want to work? When you're selecting the talent to join your organization, do they have some type of connection to it? So if it's a retail business, maybe they grew up in a family of retailers, or they have a real flair for product display or selling. So I think there's something about the values and the skills of the people, and then that allows you to find how can you hook that in to what that business is there to do, in that way. And there will always be a way to ensure that every member of the workforce knows that their job is important in achieving the mission. And quite often that's just down to the human skills that they bring. So it might be problem solving, it might be their ability to engage with customers, it might be their clinical excellence in healthcare. And interestingly, I've worked in healthcare, and that's an organisation where obviously clinical standards and patient safety, are paramount. So, you're going to be in a culture there where risk taking is less likely to feature. So somebody who enjoys risk taking might not fit well into that. So I think it really makes you think about recruiting the right people that are going to fit the mission and purpose of your organization. Now, I don't say that in a way where I mean to be discriminatory or not diverse or inclusive about the workforce, but there is something about making sure that there is that connection and alignment for people.
Yeah, definitely. And when you think back to just if we think about that idea of the cause and the mission and the purpose at a more maybe global level, I think policing globally over the past few years has gotten a bit of a pasting. And, we look back at some of the things that have happened and some of the challenges. And I think that a lot of those challenges then reflect not just on the police forces, whether it be the Met, whether it be the police forces in the US. We look at those not as localized issues, but as, well, if that's happening there, it must be happening everywhere. And I wonder what is the impact of those global policing challenges on officers and staff in your organization when it comes to culture?
Yeah, well, I mean, you're quite right, Scott. I mean, it's fair to say that PSNI is probably, likely to be the most scrutinised public service in the UK, if not beyond those boundaries. And then on top of that, you have all of the thoughts, evidence, some media, some not, some myths around policing, and how policing is delivered to different societies and communities. So, just by way of example, there's been, media attention and evidence around policing response to Black Lives Matter protests. Obviously, there was the murder of Sarah Everard by a police officer from the Met, as you've mentioned. In Northern Ireland, we're trying to deliver policing in a post-conflict society, and we're under significant political scrutiny, media scrutiny, and therefore, as well, we want to be representative of the communities that we serve. So our workforce composition is critical to that, and we do know that we have a number of underrepresented groups. So, what does that mean? Gosh, well, it's a really challenging foundation or platform on which to delve into culture to start with. And I think first and foremost, we had to be pretty courageous to do this. But it was the right thing to do, because all good organisations, irrespective of what they do and where they do it, should understand their culture and does it align to their mission and purpose.
Yeah.
So we sort of kept reminding ourselves about that and saying, let's do the right thing rather than get caught up in what we think people will say about this. And up front, you'll know this because you work with us on the project, but we made three really simple, commitments to our workforce when we were embarking on this cultural audit survey and feedback session. So we said, one, we want you to participate. Your opinions matter, and we will publish the results in full. Which openness and transparency was. There were a lot of questions about that, and they were saying, "Oh well, if it says bad things, they'll not tell us." No, we said, "No, we will absolutely publish these results in full." Two is that because we were embarking on this, we needed to give those who were going to participate a feeling of a little bit of security and safety, that they could say what they genuinely thought. So we engaged with yourselves, an independent partner, so that there was that gap between and protection of somebody's individual data, as it were. And then thirdly, we made the commitment that we would take action on it. And we've got, we've been spending our last 18 months focusing on that part, which we'll come to, I'm sure. So yeah, significant challenges when you're thinking about delving into your culture, depending on your organisation, and being really clear on, I suppose, the appetite of your senior team to embark on this type of work, commit to it up front, and then follow through, because culture isn't something that you change or develop overnight. That's like, I think you used the term to us when you were working with us, Scott, around the difference between culture and climate in an organisation. So yeah, those are just some of the challenges that we have, and taking on the cultural audit. I think it helped us do three things. We got facts and evidence and a baseline data, both qualitative and quantitative. We were able to do some root cause analysis, because what the symptom was might not actually have been the root cause. And then it also helped us to do a bit of myth busting. So there were quite a few controversial things that some of our critics were expecting to see, and maybe they didn't see that in the results.
Yeah, and it's a really good point. And I think that there was a huge amount in what you just said there, and I'm just processing it through. That I think probably one of the big pieces is that when you're thinking about going out and testing the culture or auditing the culture of the organization, it's not just about the micro existing culture or environment in which you're doing that, the context in which you're doing it, but you also do have to think about what is the macro culture as well. What's the macro context that we're doing it in? Because every organizational culture sits within a bigger, wider context than just the organization. So it's worth just having a think about that as well too, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, really practically, we absolutely anticipated that the findings of our audit on culture would make front page headlines. That's sort of very commonplace for the examination of policing in Northern Ireland. And okay, yes, some of the findings did end up being reported around, but because of the open and transparent approach that we took, that didn't have the same negative impact that it could have. And actually, some of the initiatives that we've put in place to address the findings, because we've worked very closely in partnership with our staff associations throughout it, have actually, created very positive headlines in some of the actions that we've taken. So I suppose, Scott, when you invited me on, you hadn't remembered how much I like to talk about this type of thing, so you'll have to interrupt me as we go.
When I said 35 minutes, this could be an hour and a half, people. So buckle up. Let's go back to the findings. What I'd love to do is hear a little bit about what concerned you in the findings in the report, and what positives did you see? What kind of made you go, "Oh, good, there's some good stuff here that we can build on."
Okay, so I mean, we had obviously a survey, which was 40 different cultural statements that we asked our workforce to respond to on a scale of 1 to 7, and then you and your colleagues helped us facilitate some workshops where we were able to really drill down into root cause analysis and some of those themes. I suppose concerns. If I start with the concerns and I'll finish with the strengths. Overall, the scores were low. So it wasn't just that there was one area that scored quite low in terms of strongly disagree that this is a trait, that it was visible or dissatisfied. Um, but the scores were low pretty much across the board. Um, and that really brought into question, I suppose, the level of development or maturity, if I call it that, that existed in the organisation when it came to cultural development and investment in people, particularly investment in people. Had it been had the workforce got a little bit left behind because of underfunding, because of they're so busy focusing on giving their services to the public that that we've forgotten about um, giving our services as an employer to our workforce. And I suppose, concerned then from me professionally, I was concerned about, oh gosh, the scale of change here is big. Can we do this? And bear in mind that we did this at a time of considerable financial constraint. We'd stopped recruitment because it was unaffordable. And the resources that we did have, our police officers and police staff, were exhausted, but yet they were still showing up, doing incredible, brave, courageous work every day. So any commitment to progress and change was going to have to be with whatever we had, not with additional funding necessarily. We also, I suppose, there were three underlying assumptions, cultural assumptions, that the survey told us that we had, and one of them, was sort of badged as "we are fearful." Now, bear in mind that PSNI exists to keep people safe. So, for one of our cultural assumptions to be "we are fearful," that's not particularly positive language. But when we did the root cause analysis and drilled down into that, that was less about the external threat under which our workforce operate, albeit that is real.
Yeah.
We've seen evidence of that, regrettably, even in the last couple of years. But it was actually more as a result of the work, the scrutiny that their work comes under, and about behaviours and conduct within the organisation, and being held to account by the Ombudsman as an external organisation, and through our professional standards department. So I suppose that in the concerns piece, it really highlighted the need for us to see the interconnectivity between what the cultural findings were telling us. On a positive, oh my goodness, I mean, what an incredible workforce we have, and it was like a real reminder of that. So despite considerable challenge, under-resourcing, delayed pay awards, challenging, scrutinised organisation, post-conflict society, different expectations of communities around policing. Despite all that, the teams were cohesive. They delivered above all else. And those were some of the real positives that we were hearing about in the audit, around the desire to work with communities to find solutions, that they would respond and deliver to achieve outcomes even when things were difficult. And also we saw some feedback that they did, even though we operated in those challenging circumstances, that they recognised that well-being was important, so workforce well-being, and they recognised that some efforts had been taken around trying to create an organisation that better represented the community, even if that hadn't actually shifted in the demographic.
I think one of the things, and I love that answer, thank you. I think one of the things that really struck me, particularly when we were doing workshops and focus groups, was this unbelievable sense of civic duty. Because I think that when you first join policing, whether it's the PSNI, the Met, the Strathclyde Police, wherever, or when you first become a nurse, or when you first become somebody that works in public service, the pay isn't great. Like they aren't necessarily very well paid jobs. And I kind of just go, wow, putting yourself in danger for that salary, and just that sense of civic duty that people seem to have was unbelievable. It was unbelievable. That sense of wanting to do better for others, wanting to serve others was palpable.
Yeah, I mean, having worked in other organisations, I'm humbled, by some of the experiences that, officers and staff tell me about, and about, the reality of working in PSNI. We have police officers and police staff who have not told their friends or family where they work. We have police staff and police officers who it's not just they who have signed up to be part of this incredible organisation, but they've actually really signed up their families because of the
Yeah.
support that they give them. This is a contract of employment plus. So, us understanding our workplace culture is so important because we got to be able to give back. That contract has to work both ways. Um, One of the things as well, we realised that you know given the we were trying just to survive with the funding that we had in order to keep delivering the services that we are responsible for. You know, in that, sometimes you forget to recognise and celebrate the amazing achievements and
Mhm.
just the everyday acts of heroism and selflessness and courage and help and support and care that our staff and officers give to victims or other members of the public. Um, so since the results, we've put huge effort into starting to, remind everybody about how, the pride of the workforce and the great work that is done, and trying to get the different stories in the headlines internally and externally.
Yeah, brilliant. You touched there on one of the three kind of themes that came out of the audit, which was around being fearful.
Hmm.
And I think that, certainly from our perspective, one of the angles on that was people feeling supported when they make decisions, that they know that somebody has got their back. And it was referred to many times as top cover. How can organizations address an issue where people in the organization may not necessarily think that the organization has their back?
Oh, I think. I mean, you might not be surprised at me saying this, given I'm in the HR profession, but I think it's about that, know your people, and it's the human connection. It starts with trust and confidence. Um, if we want our communities and the public to have trust and confidence in us, and same for any business, if it's a retailer, you want your customers to have trust and confidence in you so that they return and buy from you again and not a competitor. But if we want the public to have trust and confidence in us, our workforce have to have trust and confidence in their employer.
Yeah.
So and that is one step at a time. So building trust through openness and transparency, visible, accessible leadership. I'm a real believer in the line manager making the difference. Someone feel like somebody cares about me as a person, and I've got somebody to talk to. Um, and I mean, for us in particular, and in policing in particular, there is a real focus on how we handle, misconduct and any breaches of our code of ethics. I mean,
Mm.
of course, the public expect police officers to demonstrate the highest standards of professional conduct at all times. At the end of the day, they're there to uphold the law, so therefore there's nearly a higher expectation. Um, and we've done quite a bit of work around looking at how those where there are alleged examples of misconduct, how those are investigated in a way which balances accountability and common sense, if I say that, and being fair. So, actually, is this about a coaching conversation, helping somebody learn, and a learning culture where we do get things wrong? We will all get things wrong.
Mm.
But that's how we learn and grow, and let's deal with it in a coaching and learning environment versus the need for a more formal investigation um, through the relevant, processes and procedures. So I think being very open that we were rebalancing in that way and encouraging that, we want to be a learning organisation, and that and taking that approach. But that's about, local line management confidence in being able to, observe feedback and coach the behaviours and the performance, of their teams on a regular basis.
Yeah, it's that age old question. How could you have done that differently? Do you think?
Yeah.
That being able, the leaders having the capability, the skills to be able to have those conversations is incredibly powerful. But that also takes people, which comes back to your point about trust. People in organizations going, well, I'll just make the decision, and I know I'm probably 70% there. So you know what, I'll just go for it, and let's see what happens. But then for that leader to be able to come in afterwards and have that coaching conversation to say, well, look, that didn't pan out quite as you expected. How might we do that differently in the future? But also then making sure that managers then taking the responsibility to have those conversations rather than passing that up the line to a conduct committee or a conduct department for them to be able to sort it out. Leaders have to take that responsibility on themselves, right?
Absolutely. And what was I can look back now and say fascinating, but it's probably the wrong word, to describe this. But during the time that we were conducting our cultural audit, we had a series of unprecedented events in this organisation, many of which were all in and around this very area of trust, top cover, as you've called it, belief in the leadership, somebody having my back. So we started this, explorative process with our cultural audit, I think in January of 2023. Later that year, we had the attempted murder of a serving police officer. We had a judicial review on a case that had been explored, which was all about the treatment of officers and their conduct during a policing event that happened on the Ormeau Road. We had one of the largest data breaches that has been experienced across the UK. Again, an issue that obviously had significant about trust and confidence of the workforce, and the workforce saying, who's to blame for this? My personal data has been leaked, and obviously there are significant security ramifications for that. We had the chief constable, resulting in the chief constable resigning their position and the deputy chief constable not returning to their desk. And others, we had industrial action, we had pay awards that weren't paid, so we had, it was like, I can't describe the turbulence that the organisation faced at that time. And if you were a member or as a member of that workforce, to therefore go, well, who, hang on a minute here, like, who's got my back? I'm the officer that throughout all this, I'm the member of staff that throughout all this has turned up every day, committed to my job, liaised with families who've experienced some of the most horrific things they may have had to in their life because of a crime that they've been subject to. They've been kept investigating, they've kept supporting our services, having all our equipment on the road, and the people are going, who's got my back during this? Yeah. And in a interesting way, when we got through that very acute phase, that enabled us to really, really, I suppose, maximise on this opportunity to say, it was nearly like a moment where we were able to reset and go, we've got to approach this differently. This is about, the person behind the uniform, and, we are here for them. And as we described earlier in the podcast about how much those people give every day, and what do we then as an employer give to make it a great place to work?
Yeah, and to the credit of the organisation, those three things that happened, and then the chief con going as a result, were enormous challenges. Yet the organisation said, you and the team said, let's just keep going because this is important. And I think that was a real credit to the organisation.
I think my advice to anyone listening is going, how do you ever, like, where do you start with that? it's just something about one step at a time. Marginal gains and that relentless belief coming back to why are we here doing it, and who is here to help us do it, and it just that one step at a time.
Yeah, yeah. Let's look forward, because of course you said at the top, Claire, that one of your three promises to people in the organisation was that we would make change happen.
Sure.
How did the results of the audit shape your change plans, and what are some of the practical things that you're doing as a result to try and move now the culture forward?
Okay, well, I think first and foremost, we didn't just come up with the actions or ideas to address it on our own. In our little boardroom in headquarters, it was really important that we included our officer and staff representatives. So we've got a forum called Your Voice, just one example, but and all of our minority and diversity staff associations, the Police Federation, Superintendents Association, NIPSA Trade Union, they all are involved in that forum, and others that we have. So first we took time, so it would have been dead easy to get the results and just sort of jumped immediately to dissecting them. And we said, hang on a minute, let's respect the fact that over 4,000 of our workforce have told us what they think. Let's just digest that. Let's actually let's actually take time to listen and hear what they've said. And then we moved into that sort of prioritization. So of the recommendations that came out, we then said, okay, what are some of the really practical things that are sort of actionable initiatives or changes that we need to do, because we knew that there was a need to sort of really clearly and overtly link and label what we were doing back to the audit, so people could see and feel a difference, and again build that trust that we were taking action. So we had, there were some things that were as simple as we had paused some of our recognition and medal ceremonies. So we reintroduced those, and have a calendar of recognition events that we now publish and celebrate and recognise all sorts of great work. The diversity across our workforce, problem solving awards, other awards that are in partnership with other organisations. So a whole commitment to recognition and rebuilding and celebrating the fantastic, work and achievements and performance that happens across the organisation and across multidisciplinary teams. There was a real commitment to visible and accessibility of the leadership team, and so we have continued to make sure that our engagement with all of our representative groups is very active and frequent, and that happens locally as well as, I'm going to say, centrally. And then we have developed I called it initiative, but we're running large scale team events called Team PSNI, which has taken a wee bit of investment, but that's about, again, connecting the workforce together so that they can celebrate what happens in all different parts of the organisation, that we're all part of one team. There's a live Q&A session with the service executive team, and they can ask any question that they want, and they do keep us challenged and give us ideas. So that we've had over 2,000 people attend those events so far, and the feedback, we've been getting some feedback from those events that link to the questions that we did in the cultural audit, and already demonstrating that people's views are shifting. And then again, this is a really fundamental, important thing. We've restarted recruitment. So we have, our chief constable in his external messaging to our sponsor department, our policing board, our politicians, to say this has to stop in terms of we need to invest in the police service if we want to keep people safe, not impact neighbourhood policing. And we are, starting to accept that we've been in a period of survival, and we now need to try and recover our officer and staff numbers to a minimum level, and being very giving the organisation hope with that. So yes, it's tough out there, and we're asking you to absorb more, but there's hope that we are leading this organisation in the right way to address some of it. So those are just some of the examples of actions that we've taken.
Brilliant. Which to listeners might seem like, very basic standard things, but actually often they're the most important things. Talk to people, get them in the room, listen to them, recognize, make sure they've got the resources that they need to do their jobs really well. And those things are all part and parcel of creating amazing culture. We are nearly at the end of our time, unfortunately, because I know that you and I could talk about this stuff all day. Last question, and just in 30 seconds, where organizations are going through a program of culture change, what is the most important place to focus, do you think?
Well, I think if it's around cultural change, focus on the why. So what is the mission and purpose of this organisation? Why does it exist? And then how to connect your people to that mission. And what do you need to give to them to demonstrate that they matter to you? And in
Yeah, brilliant. Clare, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Thanks a million for being here, for sharing the story, for sharing some of your experiences of the whole idea of just even getting involved in a cultural audit. So thanks a mil.